Welcome to the HerdCon Presents Book Chats. This is actually our last episode of our Appalachian season, and in order to celebrate that, we are here in the new iCenter in the Brad Smith Business Innovation Building. This is the inaugural podcast, the first one ever recorded here. Before we get further into things, though, I want to give our normal disclaimer that the opinions expressed in this podcast do not represent HerdCon, Marshall University, Marshall Libraries, or the Marshall English Department. Dr. Lumpkin, you want to get us started?
Yeah, I also want to say before we like maybe another level of disclaimer, another level of disclaimer that that these are our perspectives and thoughts and reflections on today's book at the time that we've read and studied it and did for this podcast. And so I know this is a book I've read twice now. And I certainly my perspective on it changes, or I notice new things. And so there's always, and I think this is the thing. Maybe it's the English teacher in me. That you come to you experience a book in different ways. So this is merely a snapshot of how we're thinking at the time. It may change, it may not, it may deepen. But just keep that in mind that when you're reading literature, that this is just we may not notice everything about this. I think quite lovely book. And just be mindful of that this is just our perspective at the time, and there's no way we could talk for many hours, but we don't want to keep you for many hours to discuss it. So the book today we're going to talk about is Loving Mountains, Loving Men by Jeff Mann. Jeff Mann is an Appalachian author, grew up in Hinton, West Virginia, along the New River. He is a prolific author. He's done publications, novels, short stories, essays. Some of his books include Cub and Country, among others. Loving Mountains, Loving Men actually is in a second edition now. This is the early edition that we both read. So there's a second edition out now with a new afterword by Mann. He is also, along with Julia Watts, edited LGBTQ literature, fiction and poetry from Appalachia, which was an anthology, the first of its kind that explored specifically Appalachian authors. And he also really, this is a book that has shorter essays, kind of micro essays, poems. So he's a very prolific author, to say the least. He teaches. He's been a longtime professor at this point at the Virginia Tech in teaching creative writing, and I think one of the things he's a multiple-time winner of the Leather Awards, writing about leather, that. So he's a well-established award-winning writer that we'll be talking about today. So I wanted to kind of get some of your. As I mentioned, I'd read this before. The first time I read it was spring semester of 2020. So maybe that was not the best time to. I assigned it to my class. It was maybe not the best time to kind of look back and reflect on it because there was the pandemic going on. So it was nice to come back to this one after a couple of years. But what were some of your kind of impressions and thoughts of this particular book?
I'm not normally a poetry person. But I really loved the way Jeff Mann would start each, I'm going to call them chapters, even though they're more like sections,
Yeah.
with a poem itself, and in a way that poem introduced you to characters that are coming up or introduced you to ideas that he's getting ready to talk about. I really loved that. But also, I just really loved the story as a queer Appalachian myself. A lot of what he was talking about was very resonated within me. With this love of wanting to stay where you love, but having to find some kind of compromise within yourself. I was very touched by so much of what I read in this book.
Yeah, I think that. I mean, that's one of the big tensions, and it plays into a lot of assumptions people may have about LGBTQ people who identify as LGBTQ or gay men. And often what gets associated is they're viewed as an part of an urban population. This is, oftentimes people moving to, kind of urban areas where there's a strong community LBGT of gay men. Do you think San Francisco, Washington D.C., Atlanta, Miami, Key West? Key West is kind of a strange part. It's a little smaller, um, but and then we don't necessarily think of uh, someone being gay as being in a rural place.
I really love it because I feel so much with him. I'm not your tragic rural gay.
Hmm.
My life is beautiful and happy just where it is, and I'm going to keep standing here and fighting for it
Hmm.
because my community at large needs me to stand and fight.
Hmm.
Can't handle the running away, and I love that that's what Jeff Mann and his father. Oh my gosh, I think his dad was my favorite character in the whole book.
Yeah. I think it is. It is. I think part of the memoir as a whole is him figuring out what he wants, what he likes, where he wants to be, where he feels most comfortable, and that's part of. And I think in a lot of ways, this is kind of you mentioned the poems, and they're to me the poems in that start chapters are like the sections. They're like epigraphs that he wrote for himself. It's like I'm gonna like people have quotes or little poems or some little part, and he just goes ahead and does it. I know exactly what I need for it to open this chapter with. So here's the poem, and I think in a lot of ways there are almost a lot of the sections are like vignettes or they're longer, more sustained essays, and I think they all have a very much a poetic quality to them. They emphasize detail, they emphasize lyrics, they emphasize precision of language. And so it is this kind of thing that it is a what we would call a little bit of I would say a hybrid work that it's prose, it's poetry, it's different kinds of essays, travel writing, erotica. It's all these different kind of mishmash of things, which I feel in a lot of ways, uh, Mann's personality and his background kind of play into that very strongly.
For sure. I think that because of who Mann is and the point that he's trying to make with this book, that I can be all these beautiful things at once, something that you can't nail down, is exactly why that format works with this book, because that's what it is. It's a photo book, it's a scrapbook. Like, there are so many things that you could call this book, and yet none of them are exactly right.
Yeah, and these little things that he doesn't. He's something I remember about something about Sylvia Plath, and he was somewhat a poet. He references a number of times. I think it was something about the way she is as a writer. Like sometimes you can't. Sometimes a poem you're going to write's going to be a table, and sometimes it's going to be a chair, and sometimes it's going to be a plate, and that's okay. And I think there are a lot. There are a lot of little short sections. So this is something that is pretty easy to digest. If there's a little section that you're maybe not in it, there'll be another section along shortly. And there's certainly kind of essays that go on for kind of sections that go on for like 10 or 12 pages. But it's a lot of little things, I guess, in kind of that it's a mosaic, and you put all these things together that tells this little different parts. And they're clearly like themes and ideas running through it.
And then I still feel like this is reminding everybody that no matter how much information we get in this through all of its different forms, this is still just a snapshot of Jeff.
Yeah. And I mean, this is a book that's now over 20 years old. And he's written things have happened in his life that he's written about since. It's been around long enough to have a second edition, but I feel like it is like a gay man from West Virginia looking back on kind of his middle age, and one of the things I remember, he'd written an essay years later called "Big Queer Convocations." That's what he called it. That was the title, and he had eventually bought a property in Hinton with his partner, husband, and then now officially legal when marriage equality was passed. His husband by any state, by the rules of any state, and he has like events over and dear friends. They come over periodically and they have big cookouts and hang out and be with each other. And that sense of what strings that come through strongly here is that sense of community and that sense of friendship among people who LGBTQ people.
Yeah, I like that Mann talks about gay men feeling trapped when he's like, but no, I'm not one of those trapped ones. I'm here because I want to be here.
Mhm.
And I think that that is a really beautiful thing. And I think that it really highlights how beautiful our area is, too. That, yes, this person who could face so much discrimination still loves this area so much that it's worth something.
Yeah. I mean, I like to think of it as like you love the place, even if the place doesn't necessarily love you back, because he certainly, certainly, I think his parents, relatively speaking, from other narratives I read, got around to being more accepting of him and his when he told them he was gay, and he certainly had his struggles. And I think it also is an interesting kind of time capsule of uh what someone who's young and gay going through at the time in that particular era. I think it was one thing. Um, this is a book, so just another like little shout out to this book. This full disclosure, this is written by Allison Carey, doubly erased LGBTQ literature in Appalachia, and it is, I believe, it is the first book that specifically explores and analyzes literature, LGBTQ literature from Appalachia. It's the first book that does that. And I think I thought this was like really interesting in the quote here. Let me just get a second here, and feel free to add anything, because this is, let's see.
While you're looking for that,
Yeah.
I also really love that Jeff Mann, I don't know if he ever went through it, but reading this book, you would never think that he was a self-loathing, closeted man. And I think so much of that has to do with the teacher he talks about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and the way that gay people, queer people find each other in Appalachia, it's a very different way of communicating. You say things and you hint at things to try to read people. And I just thought it was amazing that that teacher wasn't afraid
Mm-hmm.
to reach out. I mean, risk, gosh, her job. I
Yeah.
can't imagine. Could she have even been jailed for giving them obscene? What would that have looked like? And yet, for her, making an impact on a young gay boy was more important than all of that.
Yeah, I believe it was Joe Davison.
Yes.
And she eventually had to leave because, again, kind of very homophobic principle, according
Yes.
to Mann's writing. And I think it is that sense of think about the sense of community, the sense of camaraderie, and he certainly is someone. I think something that also plays into, very much plays into Appalachian literature is that value of and that appreciation of women, that idea of matriarchy, the power that they have, that they were there to be friends with him, they were there to protect him, they were there to look after him, and he talks about being like this very kind of shy, retiring, kind of mannered. His mother tried to make him nice and mannered, but then wanted him to be like a regular, manly, straight type person, and just doesn't quite do that. So yeah, in the book, there's a little. I think it's interesting. Talks about when the book came out. It had a lot of excellent praise from it critically. I found this very kind of interesting. This is a quote from a little section about it. This is Christopher B. Stewart in the Journal of Western Virginia History also praises Loving Mountains, Loving Men for being the first of its kind and calls the book a rich, multi-genre autobiography. Yeah. And a needed and welcome addition to a small but growing body of regional queer literature in a critique that seems overly optimistic. In hindsight, Stewart goes on to question Mann's portrayal of homophobia in Appalachia, suggesting the text's emphasis on intolerance as a feature of Appalachian culture seems outdated and that the tone of struggle may no longer be typical of the post-high school Appalachian queer experience. Although Stewart maintains the text is valuable for any survey of sexuality or gender studies, he nonetheless suggests the broader national changes the region has anticipated in since the 80s have rendered Mann's account a relic of a past time. And in the writing, Carey goes on to say that Jeff's insistence of claiming both his identities as a gay man and as an Appalachian, and basically that homophobia is still alive and well in Appalachia. And I think that just seems like wow, that was that has not aged well as far as a reading of the book goes.
Yeah, just when you were reading that
Yeah.
section, my
I'm
face,
sure
I'm
you've
sure.
got some contorted facial expressions. Yeah.
Yeah, like, what do you mean it's not accurate? I don't think. I would really love to know if the person that wrote that is a gay person living in Appalachia.
Yeah.
Because I can assure you, just yesterday one of my older family members posted, she doesn't care, homosexuality's a sin. No, it's not gone. My post high school experience, yeah, has not been, I would say, very gay friendly until I moved to Huntington.
Yeah. And you still have people, people getting attacked and hurt and things that get reported and things probably don't get reported. So it's not and I think Huntington is a very LGBTQ positive town compared to the rest of West Virginia. But there's still a lot of work to do.
Yeah, I mean, we're getting ready to get the Rainbow Crosswalk, and how many comments I've read about, well, I'm going to do donuts on it, and I'm going to do this. And it's just, no, homophobia is very alive and well. And if we're going to make Appalachia the place it can be for everybody, sweeping it under the rug and acting like it doesn't exist hurts everyone.
I think what's interesting too, in the book itself, he talks about the basic murder and torture of Matthew Shepard in 1998 in Wyoming, and that it was like, okay, here literally there is an example in the book that points to the criticism that this is still a struggle, this is still an issue, and a lot of it depends on what your zip code is, and a lot of it depends on what your address is too. That it's
Yeah, I feel like anybody who says that homophobia is a problem of the past probably thinks racism is as well.
Yeah. Yeah, we are not in a post-racial or post-homophobic world. That's certain. But yeah, and I think there is obviously there's certainly those external challenges, and I think too there's also the internal and personal challenges that you have. I mean, he's and again, keep in mind, I'm a cisgendered straight person, so I'm just looking at this and seeing this is a story of a human being wanting to live his life as he is, as a gay man, and the struggle he has with finding somebody with how to go about it. He doesn't necessarily, he's got the women looking after him. He's got his friends, but he's like fumbling around and figuring things out just as much as anybody else. I do think that for straight folks out there, if you say like, "Hey, I'm straight and I like certain," like here's a handy map and a handy set of instructions to explain this is what typically happens, and this is your process, and these are some of your options and stuff like that. But there's not really like a roadmap that's very convenient for particularly for somebody like Mann in West Virginia.
Yeah. And I mean, even gay spaces, and I mean, I don't blame straight women for it. They feel safer at the gay club. So where straight women go, straight men go.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. And so, I think what Mann is saying, especially if we're thinking about in the lens of Matthew Shepard, is how scary that can be even in your own space. Yeah. A space that's supposed to be for you, and you're still possibly in danger. I mean, look at Pulse nightclub.
Yeah. I think okay, this is my it always seems strange to me when people want a bunch of straight people want to go to the gay bar. And I'm always like, that's their space. Let them have their space. And I do think that seems to be, historically, like I remember some NPR, a little segment. It was like in Roanoke, they were in the 30s, 50s, there were like 10 or 12 gay bars. There may have been more. There were a lot of gay bars in just moderately sized towns. There was a lot of space that could be their space. And now it seems like it's in decline. For sure. That it's like, hey, let's all go here. It sounds like a fun place. And I'm just like, just let them have their space.
Or, if you go to a gay bar and a gay person hits on you, recognize that you're in their space.
Yeah.
But yeah, I really feel like, I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but that like gay and straight spaces are melding, especially as we get into more complicated gender and more complicated sexuality.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to see more of that melding, and it's going to be interesting to see what gay spaces look like in the future.
Yeah. And, like this is like in large part a good thing, but also like the world is very different. Like, certain people like me are not going to be knocked down for my sexual, sexual wants or desires or identity or anything like that, or how I look. They might do it for other reasons, but they're not going to do it just for that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just, and he certainly talks fondly about, like, it's a mix of like certain, like, it was a particular gay bar in Morgantown that he thinks of fondly. And then also as he got older, like going to certain bar, like, I heard this place was awesome, but I'm just a little, like, I think that just comes with age. You just get older and some things start to seem stale and you just want to go home and hang out and eat and watch movies and stuff like that. So
nothing like reminding you of your age
Yeah.
than going to a college bar.
Yeah.
You're like, oh,
this is too
that's
much.
what you all are into. Now.
Y'all have your fun, but it's just like, I'm gonna go to bed now. So
I'm gonna go watch movies and eat donuts in bed.
So, getting around to it, that thinking about, I think one of the things he does in the book is he talks very honestly and brutally about his actions and what he did. And I was kind of thinking what your thoughts were about it. Particularly in the memoir, there is a person who goes by the name of Thomas. For all we know, I don't know if it's his real name or not. But he has basically an affair with this man who is in a committed relationship, and it is not a very equal relationship. And I was kind of wondering what's your thoughts about? I have thoughts, but what are your thoughts about that whole?
So I'm polyamorous. I
Yes,
don't know
I'm aware of that.
I don't know if our audience will. But yeah, so at first I was like, oh, awesome, especially when he goes to visit this man and his husband. And I was like, oh, are we going to get into a little? No, there was nothing ethical about it. But I also like not shying away from it either. Like, it is ugly. It isn't, but it can also be in the moment this passionate, beautiful thing, even in its ugliness. And I love that Jeff Mann complicates that without excusing it or saying that it's okay.
Yeah.
He is vilifying what he did while also saying that, it could be a beautiful experience for me, even though I was wrong in doing so.
Yeah. I mean, and I think the writing just shows how thirsty he was. I don't know I don't know if that's the appropriate term, but he is just like, and he gets strung along. So of course, when he gets thrown a crumb, and he references a story called Hands from Sherwood Anderson about a character, Wing Beetlebomb, and that he is someone that, again, if you've never read Winesburg, Ohio, you should go check out that book. It's an awesome short story cycle. And he's just someone he's gotten himself into trouble for making physical human contact, but he longs for it so much. And so he's, very, someone who's an English major. So he's got his English references, and he's making his illusions really well, that he feels like that he's desirous of these little crumbs and scraps that this other man is giving him. And, sometimes you're just like, he just can't help himself. I feel for him.
I just, the husband that was being cheated on is just so nice.
Mm-hmm.
And like, even after he finds out, he's still nice. And Jeff does it again.
Yeah.
I was just, and like the emotions that he talks about, like when he knows that it was over, and Jeff was like, but I'm going to end it on my terms. Like, I already knew. I could definitely see power in doing so, of cutting off the string that's pulling you. But I was like, Jeff, why do you keep going back? Don't shit where you eat.
I mean, it is it is this kind of combination of things. I think that if you've anyone that's ever been in their life where they feel like they are not like you've been going through a dry spell. You don't have nobody. You don't think anybody would like you or want to be with you. All that kind of stuff. I think we all deal with those kind of insecurities some more than others. And that he wants something solid, someone a strong relationship, but he also wants he even said he wants the bad boys.
I the way he talks about it in the book, I wonder if him and his husband had some kind of open understanding because he talks about loving his husband, but then he's like, "But I still love leather and men," and he knows it. So I always wondered, like, is it an understanding between them?
hmm Or I mean, or is it just like he's just gonna that in some ways like writing is therapeutic and he can write these things out and kind of deal with that, like he can express himself because also like you know uh, these kind of trysts can be kind of unfulfilling too, and not to say that like we all it's finding a relationship with someone and having a kind of committed relationship is like the ideal and it's only applicable to anybody. But if you're wanting that and the other person doesn't want that, then it's fine if you just want something that is just purely physical, or if you want, it's just when people aren't uh, generally in agreement with what they want out of
Yeah, I think also maybe we didn't get the whole picture. Maybe Jeff didn't give us all, but communicate.
the thing.
Communicate your wants and your feelings. Like, have that conversation up front.
Yeah.
Like, set the boundaries. If you need to revisit it and talk about how things have changed, because I hope relationships aren't stale. They're always changing. They're a
Yeah.
living thing. That you can always something you can revisit if things change, but be upfront with each other. I think that might have saved Jeff a lot of heartbreak had Thomas just been like, "Hey,
Yeah.
I'm never leaving my husband for you."
Yeah. And it's like you deserve something better. It's always like I can't believe you're doing this, and you deserve something better,
Yes,
and the other partner deserves something better. Like, yeah, and I think one of the things too I really is also he talks about like driving away from these interactions, which are very sad and painful, and if you have something like a breakup and you have to drive 6 hours.
oh,
That can be a number of things. That can be like I've made a decision and I've broken things off, and I'm single, baby. Yeah, but you have those kind of moments. But then there's also like it's something that you can be very saddened by, and it's definitely very even has this like fond memory of going to Friendlies and eating milk gravy and things like that. So it's those things, and I think he gets at things that like these are like the weird thing. These are not the weird, but these are like these physical sensory things that we remember after we have these kind of highly emotional experiences.
for sure. And I think that, I mean, I'm not a straight man, but I think that, like you're saying, those are experiences. You don't have to be an Appalachian. You don't have to be a gay man. I think most of us who have been in what we thought were serious or committed relationships and had them ended, we know what that feels like.
Yeah,
Most of us have had our hearts broken, and we can relate to the ice cream and the going to a friend and just sobbing and having us like we can see those things. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about this book is that being Appalachian and gay is the main focus,
hmm
but that doesn't mean that it's not. It can't be translated into so many other identities.
yeah. And I mean, yeah. At the end of the day, I mean, I think Jeff Mann is a flawed human being that writes very well
Yes,
about those things and those frustrations. And yeah, I mean, he's dealing with attraction, lust, love. These are the same things that we all go through. I mean, it is specific to his experience, but I think often like, they'll tell you in creative writing, in creative writing classes, you get something very specific. You get very specific about something, you can hint at larger universal things, and I think that's the case. I mean, that is his experience that you can understand and at the very least sympathize with, if not feel kind of things on an empathetic level, which is what good writing's all about.
For sure. I mean, if anything, I think the heart of this book is wanting a place you belong with with the person that you belong with, or persons, because it can be much larger than romantic. Because I think the book ends or almost ends before the poems with him talking about the gay retreat
Hmm.
in Summers County
Yeah.
and how beautiful and freeing it is to be with other Appalachian gay men who
Hmm.
just get it. You don't have to explain. They just understand.
Yeah.
They don't pity you. Um, and so I think that that's one of the big points that Jeff's making. And sometimes you have to be the mountain that refuses to move.
Hmm.
You have to make the stream go around you.
Yeah.
And I love that.
That was yeah. He opens the book at the place in Maryland, the kind of gay Airbnb kind of place, not Airbnb, like a bed and breakfast. Like he's like, I wonder if that's where that's where things like with the kind of diminishment of the gay bar as being a more kind of common space, that those are like maybe it's like a kind of middle class thing if you're LBGTQ, like you can afford to go to a retreat somewhere and hang out with people who have had these kind of who identify the same as you and have these kind of common experiences. I wonder if that's something that's developed that's developing a certain kind of need there.
Yeah, for sure. Because it seems there's a lot for younger gay people. But older gay people, once you're out of the club scene, it's about finding those comfortable spaces.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think he even too. I think he's someone who he reflects a certain time. I mean, he would technically be a baby boomer, but he's a good boomer as far as he's a very good boomer as far as I'm concerned. So they're not all bad. But he has a couple of essays where he talks about interacting with a younger generation of gay men and lesbians, and there's just the he seemed like there was obviously he had his closeted time, but there was a lot of greater openness in again, depends on your zip code, depends on your address, that could be more open and out and proud. The one little part too, this little section where I think it's Justin with an E. He's going to do an internship in LA, and that sense of like worrying about him and like proud of him that he doesn't have those kind of shyness and needs, but also like the dangers of that he can't, there's a kind of admiration and concern, and kind of he gets to enjoy someone else being out open and proud and loud about it.
Yeah, living through that experience, but not in like a bitter way.
Yeah. I mean, there so these you didn't have it like we had. This whole like I think a lot of this kind of generational conflict is stupid and dumb, and generally people are lame and they kind of suck, and that's how I feel about it. But this is an older generation looking and kind of like glad that someone is able to live their life much more openly. And I think it is ultimately about him being him being more comfortable in being himself, like figuring out, oh, what, I'm going to be a bear. I'm gonna look a certain way. I'm gonna wear my leather jacket. I'm gonna get some tattoos. I'm gonna shave my head. And then ultimately that is a kind of performative and an experimentation, but then that ultimately feels so much him at the end. It is something that is a performance, but also it's to the point where it feels like second nature.
Yeah. Once you do a performance for so long, it kind of becomes
You become the
you.
person. Yeah.
Yeah, and there was a part in there, and so there's a part where Jeff Mann is talking to an even older gay man, and Jeff asks him, and it's haunted me. Oh my gosh, what do you do with your time once you have everything you want? And the older gay man says, you spend your time worrying about how you're going to lose it.
Mhm.
And I really hope, I feel just by the way it's written, but by the time this book is over, he is now the old gay man who was just worried about when he's going to lose everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved that I felt like that came back around without him having to bring it back around.
Yeah. I mean, it is. It means maybe we should always be perpetually unsatisfied, and we'll never die, and the things that we do like will never. But no, that's not good. We can't do it that way. But yeah, I mean, I think it's it is, and this is obviously this is also a book about loss. There's talks about relatives that are lost and trying to keep traditions alive and things like that. Trying his best to be a cook. He can't cook like his nanny does. Uh, but yeah, it is certainly that. It is. I think it is somebody. It is a work. Being, I'm 46, so I'm definitely in the middle age now. But yeah, I relate a lot to the book about like, okay, when you're happy or you're content, that's when the bad stuff happens. That's when things get taken away from you. Although obviously we're always having stuff taken away from us. And I had an old teacher who sadly had passed away. Um, Gerald Shapiro was a Jewish American author, and one of the things he said, I think I had a grandfather die, and he said, it's like a table, right? It's like you've got all your friends and your family. It's a big table, and then one of them leaves, and there's nothing to replace it. When a parent dies, a loved one, a partner that you've been with for a long time, and it's true. There's no reconciliation when stuff's gone. It's gone, and there's nothing that really replaces that hole in your life and in your spirit. So.
And I think it was Jeff Mann. I've been reading a lot of books recently, but I
Mhm.
think he has a part where he talks about how he hopes one day when he is happy, he knows that he's happy and he sees that and he takes that moment. And I think that those are the most wonderful moments in life. And I like though just the way he words it, it's like you are really lucky to know that you're so happy when you're happy.
Yeah.
But
Instead of like, oh, 15 years ago, I was actually happy.
now, or well, I'm happy, but I could be happier. It's like no, just take a moment and be happy for a moment.
Yeah.
It's okay. You don't hustle and grind mindset's just going to wear you down.
Hmm.
Take those moments when you have them.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I said, I found a lot of quotes in this book to be very impactful and things that I've in the week since I've read it have been really sticking with me.
Hmm. And he's an excellent writer. He's a very funny writer. I remember there was some essay he wrote about. It basically was an ode to Tim McGraw, who he admits to being very fond of. It basically like get your hands. What is her name? His wife,
Faith Hill.
Faith Hill. Faith Hill is like, get your hands off my man, Faith Hill. Something that was basically an essay like that, and so it was he's a very funny writer. It's a lot more serious in this one, but there's certainly some very wild, boisterous, kind of fun things that he writes. So
I flew through it.
yeah, yeah. It's a nice kind of snapshot, kind of pointillism, vignettes kind of thing. So it goes, and the poetry's really good. The prose is really good. He's just a fine writer. He's very prolific. So I would say this is a good book to start. This is like the starter book, and then you can go from there into his vampire stuff and his all of his other kind of more kind of things that bleed into the speculative and things that are much more kind of we would think of as kind of Appalachian. And I do want to say this is something that I've met him a couple of times. He's a lovely person, and he a long time ago, like everybody thinks I only wrote one book and I have all these other books. So if you do read this book, I would encourage you to read any number of other of his essays or poetry collections or anything else that he's got out, because he's certainly a fun author, an intense author, and he's really good with the details, so, to say the least.
I agree. All right. I don't think I have any more thoughts. Is there any final thoughts you have before we close out our Appalachian season?
I just that, and also just again, if you're kind of interested in LGBTQ in Appalachian LGBTQ authors, I'm sorry I stumble over that constantly. His edited collection with Julia Watts is an excellent kind of introduction to a number of established authors and some upcoming authors. So he's out there putting out a lot of good stuff. So.
And then I guess my recommendation for LGBTQ Appalachian authors is probably Fenton Johnson.
Mm-hmm.
Geography of the Heart, which is kind of like his autobiography of taking care of his lover while he died of AIDS. Or if you want more closer to home Appalachia, you have Scissors, Paper, Rock,
Mm-hmm.
which is about a gay man. And I think Allison Carey actually talks about the hummingbird in Doubly
Yes.
Erased,
Mm-hmm.
the gay man who goes away to a big city and comes back home to die of AIDS.
Yeah. Now,
Both great
I
works.
believe both authors are in this collection as well. So a little sampling of their work. So yeah. And I think it is. It's certainly, hopefully, something that there'll be more. Be you know, as we talk about, there'll be more LGBTQ authors coming to prominence in Appalachia. That'll have more good stuff to come out. There's a lot more out there. Misha Marin, Krista Wilkinson, Dorothy Allison, certainly some established writers, Anne Pancake, a wonderful author. A lot of good writers out there. Just we got a lot of good stuff in Apple. There's a lot of good Appalachian writers out there, and they put out a lot of good stuff. So what we've shown you this season is just a sampling. So read deeply and grandly if this is a region and and you love literature. So
It turns out that gay Appalachian isn't an oxymoron.
no, it's a lot gayer than you think it would be.